After graduating from college, I had an interest in it. Part of that was because my dad was in commercial sales at that point in time, and I'd been around construction, and it just something I felt comfortable around. And my first job was selling lumber in Damerscott, Maine. The main job was a retail lumber yard. I was selling contractors. So I was selling all sorts of building materials directly to the job site where they were getting used. I kind of realized I wasn't getting anywhere. My sales were great. I had a wonderful customer base. I was selling large volumes. They just kept going. Everything was cooking. And so I had been hired with a monthly salary. I think it was like $600 back then. Commission was supposed to kick in as the sales went. So I asked the boss, I said, when's that commission going to start kicking in? We're doing pretty good around here. And he said, I'll get back to you. When he got back to me, he told me that I'd probably have to double or triple my sales for the commissions to kick in. So I quit. And I went to work for Ketchum Lumber. They were a good choice because they owned the largest lumber mill in the world at the time, up in British Columbia. So it was a very healthy, wealthy, successful Seattle brokerage firm. It was a real privilege to go to work for them. Ketchum Lumber was a much, much different thing. It was what was called at the time a transit brokerage firm. We would buy lumber when the market was down. We would go on rail cars back to several points in the Midwest. Minneapolis was one of them, big one. And from there, you could ship it anywhere in the United States for basically one uniform price. And so what you were doing is getting the lumber closer to the market. It was a commodity that went up and down in price. It always seemed to be worth more when it was close to the market because people needed it because they had jobs. We were using the railroad system as a free warehouse to get lumber from where it was produced to where it was consumed. It was kind of fun. I did that for about 6 years. It's basically commodity trading. 1982, that was when Carter was president. Interest rates were like 18% on home mortgages. We paid 4%. It was ridiculous. You couldn't buy a house unless you were rich. So our business didn't do too well because people were no longer buying houses. They were no longer building houses. It just crushed the housing starts much, much, much later. 2 products came in during the early 2000s, late 97, 98, 99. One was for decks. It's called Trex. It's like a plastic. It looks like wood, but it's plastic. And the other was Louisiana Pacific siding, hardboard siding. And so those 2 products took a huge bite out of the Cedar market share. One year at the end of the season, I added up how much I sold, and it was exactly half as much as the year before. And I knew it wasn't good. It had gone down. So I said, okay, this isn't pretty. I got to find something new. This line of work isn't going to support me next year. And at that point in time, the state of California had basically locked up its redwood forest. Basically, there were 2 or 3 people that owned most of the redwood, and the state went to them and said, we want to buy those forests, we don't want you to cut those trees down. And at that time, the playset industry was using a lot of redwood. Anybody that was using a lot of redwood was in trouble. So I thought, okay, I'm going to work these playset accounts for 2 or 3 months. And I just did nothing but calling playset companies to see if I could sell them cedar lumber. A few of them listened to me, a few of them bought a little bit of stuff, nothing major, But I got my foot in the door with several of them. And the first big break I got from the playset companies was a lot of playsets were built at that time out of treated lumber, pressure treated lumber. So what that is lumber that's chemically treated. What it's chemically treated with is heavy metals. So it became knowledge, it was right on the front page of the New York Times that the current treatment for lumber, which was called CCA, copper, chromium, something nasty, arsenic. That was what was in it. Copper and arsenic and stuff. And then the bugs won't eat it. And it repels water real well. The year before, their sales was 90% treated lumber, 10% cedar. That year, when that news hit, it swung. It went from 90% treated to 90% cedar. That was my first big year, my first big customer in the playset industry. My sales grew, my income grew stupendously, and it peaked around 2005. During that time, the supply shifted to China. I started hearing about Chinese cedar and people wanting to sell it. We started looking into it. We got some astounding prices. The Chinese could sell you the playset parts, chopped, sanded, drilled, stained, in a box for the same amount of money per 1,000 board feet of lumber that I was selling the raw lumber for. The supply of that shifted to China, which was I was involved in at the beginning, but eventually got cut out. It was hard to hang on to that business once it went to China. And that's when I started my retail playset business. At the end of 3 or 4 years, I had a warehouse full of lumber that had been paid for. There was nothing wrong with it other than you could only build playsets out of it. And I had gotten into actually shipping parts. So I started doing parts. I had a warehouse full of lumber that was written off. And it was all good lumber. You know, it was worth, I don't know, I felt $100,000 at least, you know. But it had to be sold as playsets, and that's when I started the playset business. I could see that the old way that I'd been making money wasn't going to be there anymore. You know, the economy had started to change by then. You know, just all of a sudden everybody was in it and nobody was going to make any money, and that's when I got out of it. I stayed in the wholesale business through those years. That was really the last thing I was doing in the wholesale lumber business, was exporting lumber to China. Then when Trump became president, he slapped a tariff on China. China slapped a tariff on us. So all of a sudden the product I was selling that was going to China was tariff 20% going that way, and the finished product coming back was 20% going this way. My customer just stopped, turned it off. And by then the playset business was getting a little better and a little better, and you know, we kept at it. This year, I was still selling some lumber and hopeful that, you know, I could develop some kind of a program during the off season to build that wholesale lumber business back up. It's a heck of a lot easier sitting at this desk making telephone calls and sending emails and faxes than it is going to build the playsets. But it became more and more difficult to generate any income, and the playset business was steady. You know, if I put time in, if I worked on the website, if I, you know, just did the things you do to make a business go, it went. This year was the first year that I really just said, the heck with trying to wholesale any lumber. You know, playset business just took off in March, you know. It's never been like this year. This year's like going to be 3 or 4 times what I've ever sold in terms of playsets. It never stopped. Usually it stops after 4 months. I was thinking about getting out of the playset business because it's kind of hard to make a business work if it only goes 4 months out of the year, and that's what happened last year. I've still got people hitting my website wanting to buy playsets in the middle of the winter. You know? So it's good, you know. I suppose every business needs a good year once in a while. I'll probably have 2 in a row because of this coronavirus. And then we'll see where we go from there.